In a game like Hearthstone, it could be extremely hard to come back in a game when you're in a losing position, but there are some cards that help us get back from a losing position and win the game. These cards can be board clears, tempo swings, insane effects, and everything in between. These are the best cards to help you come back in a game of Hearthstone. Yeah, it's crazy, and then I told them if they didn't subscribe, I would fine them. Hearthstone Classic had a bunch of ways for you to come back in a game of Hearthstone. Whether you were playing an aggro deck, a control deck, or even a combo deck, there were a bunch of ways for you to crawl back into a game. Some of you probably heard an aggro deck and say, why would an aggro deck need to come back in a game of Hearthstone? Well, sometimes you're playing against a control deck, you're running out of resources, and then one card you top deck saves you, which is Divine Favor. Divine Favor is one of the strongest spells in Hearthstone history, and it has enabled many wins for a lot of aggro paladin decks. A lot of Hearthstone games, especially for aggro type decks, are lost in Hearthstone because of card advantage. When you don't have any resources, you can't finish off your opponents. Divine Favor completely negates the aspect of card advantage because you get punished for holding cards in your hand, and the aggro deck gets really happy when you do. Isn't that just fun? That didn't mean that there was a bunch of ways for control decks to come back when the aggressive deck had a really good start using a board clear. Mage had access to one of the most notorious board clears ever, which is Flame Strike. Paladin had a fantastic board clear with Equality in Wild Pyromancer, but the board clear that had the most comeback potential was Brawl. Brawl was a singular card that virtually cleared the board guaranteed against almost every single board state. Brawl has been so good to Warrior over the years that they're still playing it in 2022, which is absolutely insane, and that's why it's the best comeback AoE. Remember when I was talking about card advantage literally a minute ago? Did you already forget? Do I need to call the doctor? Well, card advantage is obviously really strong, and one card single-handedly did that for Rogue, which is Secret Passage. Your hand's bad, you could Secret Passage. You don't have an actual removal, you could Secret Passage. You're looking for lethal, you could Secret Passage. This card and its versatility can be used in so many ways, and not only was it really good to press an advantage, but it was really good to get a comeback story because it gave you a bunch of new options that can hopefully get you back into the game. I think this list would be incomplete if I did not include Deathwing. Even though Deathwing wasn't primarily used in any sort of deck, this card is actually just the definition of comeback because it's just your last resort, and sometimes a big 12-12 will win you the game. Sometimes you're going against another board-centric deck and they're going for the lethal push, and then you play a singular card and get the game out of nowhere with Mind Control tag. The ability to steal a random minion from your opponent could be one of the greatest ways to come back into a game because your opponent needs to play around it, and of course you have to get a little bit lucky, but with a little bit of luck you could win a game. One of the best ways to come back into a game is getting an extreme amount of life so your opponent can no longer get lethal damage. Zilliax does a really good job with this with a good magnetic card. Anti-Healbot can also be really good, but no card does this better than Alex Straza. Sometimes you just need a 9-mana 8/8 that could set your life to 15, and that might just be out of the reach of your opponent so they can no longer get the lethal win, and that one card will be enough for your opponent to not play Hearthstone for the rest of the day. One of the best comeback tools of all time in Hearthstone has been Iceblock for Mage. The ability to become immune for a whole turn guarantees you at least one other turn, which hopefully at that time is 10 extra mana, and the difference of one extra turn and one extra card draw could be the beginning of the greatest comeback ever told in Hearthstone. Iceblock gave you the privilege of not being scared of dying, so you could set up a really risky Alex on your opponent, setting up a lethal, go for a Frost Nova and Doomsayer combo to hopefully make them have a decision of, do I proc the Ice Block or do I clear the Doomsayer? This card was very, very powerful at making you come back. Even though Varian Wren wasn't a huge meta contender, the comeback potential of this card was very real, with the ability to draw 3 cards and put any minions that you drew directly into the battlefield. In the right matchup and with the right cards drawn, Varian Wren could easily pull you back from a really horrible situation into propelling you straight to victory. Dr. Boom is called Dr. 7 for a reason because once this card is played on curve, the game is pretty much over, but it also works in the reverse way of coming back into a game of Hearthstone. You're losing the board, Dr. Boom could be your saving grace because of the boom bots trading favorably for you. Sometimes the boom bots will hit for 4 damage and clear a minion, sometimes they'll just be just enough damage to get you lethal. This card was easily one of the best ways to come back in Hearthstone during its time. Guardian Animals was a card that was released in Skullman's Academy, and this is the best card I think on the planet to really swing the board back into your favor with a single singular card. Sure, you needed beasts in your deck, but sometimes with the Lake Thresher, you'd full clear board, you would have a board on your own, and your opponent would be crying. Before we get to the big comeback cards in Hearthstone, I did want to mention one card that does need other cards for it to be a comeback card: Animated Broomstick. The ability to give every single minion rush on your side of the board is a very powerful effect, especially when you mix it with Barov or you mix it with Libram of Hope. Whatever way you want to look at it, this card was extremely good at doing a huge tempo swing in order for you to gain board control. Reno Jackson obviously is one of the best comeback tools we've ever seen in Hearthstone, because Reno Jackson has the best healing in the history of Hearthstone, setting the game back to virtually the start and having the ability to stabilize from any position because now you're at full health is obviously one of the strongest ways to come back in any game of Hearthstone, especially a deck that's trying to burn you out in the early game like a Face Hunter. You can play this on turn 6, reset the game, win the game from that position. But there's also times where Reno will be top deck, save you from getting lethaled. After they play Alex Straza, maybe Reno. I can't understate how good Reno Jackson is as a comeback card. I bet a lot of you thought Reno Jackson was going to be the #1 comeback card of all time, but no, there's actually a couple cards that are a little bit better. Like Zephyrus the Great. Zephyrus the Great is basically everything you want in a singular Hearthstone card, which means it could be a comeback tool in almost every single way imaginable. You need a board clear, Zephyrus got you. You need a way to kill a big minion, Zephyrus got you. You need a way to actually get some value to hopefully come back into a game, Zephyrus got you. In theory, Zephyrus is every single comeback card on this list and more. And on top of this, it could give you lethal and maybe in some cases could give you a Boulder Fist Ogre, which makes it the ultimate comeback card if you're not counting Yoggsaron. Some of you might be surprised that I picked Yoggsaron as the best comeback card, and this will also include the box of Yoggsaron and Rune of the Archmage to an extent, but not nearly as much as the other two. In a game like Hearthstone, when you're in the worst position possible, the best way to come back in a game of Hearthstone is to use randomness, and no better card uses randomness than Yoggsaron. Puzzle Box to an extent does a really good job of just casting 10 random spells that hopefully pull you out of a very horrible situation, whether your opponent has a full board that you can't clear. No matter the issue that may happen to be on the board, there is a chance that one of those 10 spells will actually win you the game because it saves your life, clears the board, gets lethal for you, etc, etc. But Yoggsaron does that on a much higher level because it's entirely dependent on how many spells you played that game, which means at a minimum, this card will be casting at least 10 spells, and if you get to 20, it doubles your chances and it keeps on going. Now, obviously, Yoggsaron could end up just losing you the game, but when your chances are so dire of winning the game and Yoggsaron is your only hope, this is the best comeback card of all time in Hearthstone. I might have missed a card that you're thinking as the best comeback card, so I would love to read it in a comment down below. And thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, I'm sure you'll like one of my other videos. You look fantastic.